Welcome to the school where we talk about the business of design and the design of business. I'm Jose Caballer. This is Chris Doe. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That's the only promotional thing I'm going to say. And today we're going to be talking about problem clients. Chris.
We've all had them.
We've all had them.
And they come in different sizes and shapes, right? Some of us will come across the Micromanager. They wanted to look over your shoulder and they want to tell you how to do every single step of the process.
Can you make it a little bigger? That guy.
The pixel offer.
Yeah.
Okay. So then there's the Indecisive Client, which is usually the feedback you'll get, and this will make most of your skin crawl because you probably heard it before. I'll know it when I see it. That's usually a red flag.
Just breathing deeply.
Red flag, right? Okay. Then there's the extremely watching every penny, thrifty client.
Yeah.
That one's kind of tough too.
We don't
These
want
are
to
all
say
problem
cheap
clients.
client,
We don't want to say cheap because that's judging.
Yeah.
Okay. Then there's the ADD client.
Squirrel. They just run for whatever they like. Shiny objects. Yep.
Right. So you can't even finish one thing and then they're already asking for another thing and it just keeps moving. So the target is in perpetual motion, right?
Yep.
And then there's the last kind of client, which is, how would you phrase that, Jose?
You can call it feature whore, but that sounds a little bit wrong. Yes. Let's make this. Let's have this. Ooh, and what about this? And what about this? 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 That's always a continual adding.
They want lots of things,
Yeah.
and they're not always paying attention to how those things build on an experience.
That's an extremely good point. That there is an issue there where they might not be seeing the whole. You hit it on the nail.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the indecisive client. I think that's one that's very common, and this is one where I think my natural tendency as a creative person is this is very frustrating because why won't you tell me what it is that you want? You're all over the place, and what is it that you mean you'll know it when you see it? Now I've had a couple of those clients, and they're some of the hardest clients to work with. But now I have a different tool set, and part of the reason is what they don't have is the visual vocabulary to describe to you what it is that they want. So instead of looking at it as that's their problem, it's actually your problem. So what we try to do is we try to use non-industry terminology to help define what it is that they want. So people usually paint things in very broad strokes, like make it cool, make it organic. Those are the kinds of terms that they use, or make it very graphic, really punchy.
Yeah.
And if you go away with that, there's 1,000 things that you can make, and 999 of them will be wrong for what they want.
Yeah.
So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to use other kinds of language to parse this thing down. There's a quote somewhere, it's like, I don't need to know where the bullseye is, I just need to know what wall it's on. Okay, so there's things that you can do through facilitation, defining some parameters. You make lists. So when you say graphic, do you mean as in hard edge shapes as graphic? Or graphic is in terms of the composition, like a photographer might frame something that's very graphic.
Right.
Graphic is in nudity.
Right.
There's a lot of graphics out there. So that's what you need to do. You need to use words and make it a list. And sometimes what you'll hear is something is a conflicting list. Somebody might say, I want you to make it epic, but intimate. Believe it or not, these are words that are thrown together in the same sentence, and it's said in a very serious manner.
Yeah.
So what I like to do is I like to listen to what they're saying, write it down, and then when I can see things that are on opposite ends of the spectrum, I make a little graph. So then I bring that back up to them after they finish doing the brain dump, sharing everything that they know about what it is that they want. I'll say, I heard epic and I heard intimate. And to me, they sound like they're on two ends of the spectrum. So if we had to create a value scale, a conceptual graph between those two, is it in the middle? Or when you say intimate, do you mean something a little different than what I interpret intimate to mean?
Right.
And so we move that along. I'll give you a very precise, or I'll give you an example. Somebody asked us to do something that was very forward and futuristic, like Iron Man 3, kind of touching things in space kind of thing. And then they asked us for technology that's within our grasp, like it's grounded in reality. Those two things were not congruent with each other, right? So then I pointed that out to them. We can go here to Iron Man, or we can do with what's here. But I think there's maybe something in the middle. Things like the Microsoft, I don't know what it's called, the Surface, when you put objects on it.
Yeah.
And that is not a consumer-based product right now. It's still kind of in the prototype phase.
Right.
It's very futuristic, but it's real. Like, so then we came to this happy place where it can be as futuristic looking as possible, but it had to be something that was available today. And that's how I resolve that conflict. That's the indecisive. So really, when clients say that, they do know what it is that they want. They just don't have the language. And for fear of sounding stupid in front of you and the entire company, they need help. So you have to provide that language. The other way you can do that is to do it visually. You can say, okay, great. I heard some really broad terms. These are the terms. I'd like to do a quick follow-up with you within 24 hours. I'm going to put together a, what do they call it, a dope sheet? A tear sheet.
A
what
tear
you're
sheet,
do
mood
is
boards,
mood board, something like that.
A word and what you think the image might be.
Right. So what I'll do is, without any doing real design work, I'm going to use my experience and my kind of visual vocabulary to pull together things and group them together and present it to them. So is it within this thing? And what's great about doing it this way is it's very informal, because they know you did it in 24 hours and you're just pulling things off the internet, so people are very free to talk about things.
It's not a permanent final thing, so they're
Not at all.
afraid of
There's
saying
not a lot
that.
invested in it, so they can say, I hate that, I hate this, love this. Then you can start to move closer and closer. So it's just about a process of defining the problem so that the target is something that you can hit. Turn it over to you, Jose.
Well, here's what I heard. I heard that it's an issue of language, that the client might not have the same language, that the goal of the designer is really to align meaning. Like, does this mean this? Does this mean this? Does this mean this?
I love the way you said that.
And whatever technique you want to use. And then there's the truth is always in the middle, that it's not going to be one end or the other, that it might be somewhere in the middle, and that you have to basically try to negotiate that. You're King Solomon, and cut the baby in the middle, which I always say, and people are like, what? And then finally, is make it visual. Like, don't just talk about it, just give them some examples that aren't permanent or commitments that they're scared of. Hey, these are just some quick tear sheets or some mood boards. Is it like this? Is it like this? So it's really, that's a brilliant, I don't want to add to that because I think you covered a lot of it. What I do know and what I do add to that is that in web, one mistake people make relative to this issue of indecisiveness is two things. One, showing only one or two directions, and two, going straight to the comps. So like, here's the web layout. So you're used to that in print and in other mediums, that the layout and the final, looking at final is what you present. And that's gonna scare the hell out of an indecisive client, because it's gonna look so permanent and so final that it's gonna threaten their am I gonna get fired for this? Is this the right thing to do? So by kind of progressively, it's a little bit of
peeling back an onion.
Yeah,
the layers of an onion.
Slowly.
So you're saying a comp that's done at very high fidelity, or looks like it, very polished, finished looking thing, actually can work towards your detriment.
Very much so.
If you don't set it up properly.
It's the number one problem I see web designers that talk to me have.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the micromanager, the client who looks over your shoulder. I can tell you that I've had them, and I can tell you that's something that the designers hate, and I think a lot of it is because they don't like necessarily to engage too much live and with the client. So how do you handle a micromanaging client? Give them options. What I do is give them 3 options, and don't give them anything that's high fidelity. So I progressively, like the creative brief first. So it's like, here's the attributes that describe who you are. Are those right? Yay. Here's who you're designing for. Is that right? Yay. Okay, here's some mood boards of sites and colors and things that are kind of like what you need. And here's 3 options for that. Is it going to be a little bit like this? Or is it going to be a little bit like this? Or is it going to be a little bit like this? And they're like, well, it's going to be, and let them design it. So they're going to say, I want a little bit of this and I want a little bit of this. So you're basically co-creating with them and almost doing an interactive design process where they're ultimately putting together the pieces. But the trick is, don't give them bad pieces. Give them pieces that you think will end up working together. So when I'm directing as a creative director, as a director, I'm actually making sure that the 3 directions, though they're different, can somehow eventually blend. Because the thing people hate is when the client says, oh, can you combine direction 1 with direction 2 and put them together? And you're like, no.
Right.
But I built the process to do that.
Okay.
That's how you take care of the micromanager.
All right. I have some thoughts on that. I think somebody who is a micromanager is probably used to a team, either internally or externally, that is not very competent.
That's
So they have to
true.
roll up their sleeves, or they're just high-level people who are extremely detail-oriented.
Yeah.
But they're hiring a visual person who possibly, whose whole career and being a way of being in life is to care about every little dot, every little pixel and placement of things. So I kind of look at it a couple different ways. One is, I think what you have to do is position yourself as a person of value, where if you want somebody that's purely executional, which is I need you to move this here and here, you're overpaying for me because I charge this. And if you'd like me to do that, I'll do that, but you're not getting a lot of value. What you're doing is you're being very prescriptive and you're saying 2 pixels of this and 3 that, and that shade of pink, Pantone 748 is the one that I want. That's not where I create and provide value to my client. I want to listen to all your problems, be very diligent about taking notes, interpreting that and aligning it with your goals and doing everything that we just talked about before, and then allowing me to process and interpret what it is that you said. Because I don't think you just want me to run out and do that. And if you do, I'm probably not the right designer for you.
And would you say no?
I would say no, and I have said no. So that means you have to follow through with your conviction, and it's going to affect your pocketbook.
Yeah.
It will, and I've said it before. So,
I've said it too. When I've
you know,
noticed that might be a potential, I tell the client, maybe we're not the right fit, and I recommend another firm. The challenge is you don't want to recommend somebody that, is going to have challenges with it, and it's a value issue. It's like how much money they want to spend.
Right. And if they want to do that, what you probably need to do is to say, you're probably better off hiring a competent designer to go in-house where you can manage that whole process. But if I were you, your value is more than sitting around telling a designer what to do.
That's brilliant. That's
Right?
perfect.
So
we don't have to even that's a perfect wrap up. Position yourself as valuable. That means that your rates might be really high. No one's going to charge you to micromanage you. Nobody's going to hire you to micromanage you if they're paying a lot of money for you. So say who you are. This is how you work. So express your process before they hire you, and say no. That's it.
Say no. Ultimately, if you lay it all out and you define the roles, you gotta. That's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah,
That's it.
Totally, I agree with that.
Now, keep this in mind. Sometimes you are the client. Make sure you're not that
The
problem
one.
client. Because when you're working with the developer and you're saying, oh, here's the code I found to do this thing, why don't you copy and paste that in? You're becoming that problem client yourself. So to me, it's understanding and defining roles clearly and respecting that and not trying to do the other person's job. So when you're the vendor, you're the designer. Let's not do the designer's job for them. And when you're the developer,
yeah. Go ahead.
don't do the developer's job for them too, even though you read the latest version of HTML5 and you're up to speed on that stuff.
That's great advice for clients.
Talk about objectives and goals. Stay away from steps and action.
Which brings us to the thrifty client, or you said it slightly different.
I think that to me, the thrifty client is somebody who doesn't see any real value in design and creative process because they think it's done on the desktop, and so why should it cost so much? And it's hard for them to see the difference between a shop that has 10, 15 years of experience versus their cousin Andrew. To them, the end product looks the same.
Yeah.
This client I have a problem with, and generally speaking, I like to position myself so I don't even have to talk to
deal
them.
with that client.
So we're kind of pre-qualifying those clients. And usually you can tell if they go onto your website and you're doing big brand work, and this works for and against you sometimes, for national clients, international clients, and you won a ton of awards and all that kind of stuff, the small clients are not going to call you because they already think expensive.
Yeah.
But that's a problem Mercedes, Lamborghini, and Porsche want to have.
Yeah.
That actually helps them to drive differentiation. So I'm concerned always when the client's like, I have $15 to do this. You know what I tell them to do? I say, you know what, that's great. I try and turn that into a positive. Then you need to go to something like 99designs.com. Have them bid it out. There are 100 kids in India and in Thailand and Vietnam that will bid on this, and even in America, for a very nominal fee.
Yeah.
You will manage that process.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, these guys come back.
They do. They do. And
But they have to learn that lesson.
Thing.
You can't force it on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't teach it to them that way. They have to just go out and learn it the hard way, I think. How do you deal with thrifty clients?
I like how you said pre-qualify them so that they don't even come to you, and then give them options of where to go instead. What I did is I segmented the client types knowing what the baseline was for how much the minimum of a project we would take. And when we started and we were smaller, that was like 25 to 50K, 50 to 75, and 150 to 250. I know that sounds lofty, and the truth is that we started doing smaller projects than that, 15, 10K, heck, 5K for a week or two of something, and then we built ourselves up by reputation. But what's interesting is that you said something about pre-qualifying even on your website. What we ended up doing is, maybe out of, let's say we did 30 clients in a year, we didn't actually put all 30 clients' case studies on the website. We only put the big ones and the brands that we really wanted to work with in the future, and we curated our work. I see designers and people who put all their stuff on there, and I'm like, good for you that you have all that breadth and all that client, but you're making, it's a disservice to you.
Is it easier to sell your services for less money later on, but it's very hard to sell your services for less and then try to move up?
Right.
You become known as the guy that can do it for $2.
Yeah.
So when you're ready to charge $20,000, they'll find somebody else.
Right.
First of all, that client is only going to pay $2 for that.
They're never going to change.
They're not going to ever change. And who helped them? You did. You trained them that this could be done for $2.
Yeah.
So, but ultimately, I want to bring it back to reality. If you got bills to pay and you're starting out, you're going to have to take projects.
You're going to have to take projects
that you can't, that you wouldn't want to do for that price. But the way I like to do that too is I like to position that as, okay, you know what? Normally I would charge you $100,000. I can see that you're a growing company, and you try to negotiate something else out of this. So
Friends
you can
and
say,
family,
you know what? I can do this for 25. Part of this can be in trade then.
Yeah.
Or it would mean a lot to me if you can refer me to 3 qualified referrals or other companies, or maybe there's 2 other projects down the line that you can give to me, but I'm just a guy trying to run a business and I can't make a living off this.
That's really important that you enroll the client in understanding that, look, you're making a living from this and that you're important too. I think that going to the thrifty client or to the cheap client, if a person doesn't have empathy or doesn't care about your business, you need to walk away right away. Those people are usually not going to care no matter what.
Right.
So I like your idea of discounting and making deals. I've done many of those where I don't change my price. I give them a proposal. It's $250,000, and they're like, "Dang!" And because I like you, because we want to have a relationship, and that might be the case that we might already have an existing relationship, I'm going to give you a friends and family discount, and it's 50%, and it's only $125,000.
Right. That is one of the 7 principles of influence, by the way, about how people use social hardwiring, and one of them is contrast. So whether you're doing it for real or not, it's something that you guys may want to think about as pricing strategy, in that $20,000 seems like a lot of money, void of any context.
Right.
$20,000 doesn't seem like a lot of money relative to a $100,000 initial price, and now we're going to discount it 75% or 80% and give it to you for $20K.
Correct.
So the contrast between 100 to 20 seems great.
Yeah.
Therefore, that number now seems low.
Yeah.
So sometimes what I'll do is when I'm pricing out something, and I'm trying to kind of do a soft close and just talking about money, I'll say, in the past I've done these projects for a couple $100,000. If I told you something in that neighborhood, does that knock you off your chair?
I do that too.
So then they say, oh, that's a lot. Maybe it's like 100.
Yeah.
Like, we can probably do 100. But in your mind, you were thinking, I was going to sell that for 40.
Right.
So now you know you're either wasting your time going after something because they're way out of the scale that you're thinking of, or actually you can actually now take a lot of the guesswork out of what you need to put the number in at. And based on our last discussion about value-based, this is how you're going to do it from a value-based. It's not about your time.
Right. And I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you because you and I are talking about big numbers. And there are people watching us that are doing $500 websites. So the challenge is, how do you go up market? And right now we're not talking about that. We're talking about problem clients. But I just wanted to make that point that if we're acknowledging that the numbers we're throwing out there are big, but that they're relative to us and to how we've grown our business.
It's an example.
So the ADD client.
ADD client. This is the person that has a constantly moving target. This one's difficult, and I've had experiences like this before. Believe it or not, I designed an identity for a post-production company. They liked our work, and they said, we want you to build this thing that makes it feel like industrial light and magic. We want it to be big, like DreamWorks. We don't want just a logo with type. We want an image to go with it that's big. It's great, we'll do it. So we comped all these ideas together, presented it to the client, and loved the work. Great response to the work. Went home, something happened. Called me the next day and said, you know what, I'm not feeling this work at all. Can you show me more options?
Yes.
I said, well, is it not big enough? What's the problem? He goes, you know, I actually showed it to my wife and my daughter and they didn't like it. So that was red flag time.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I went away and thought, you know, this is not a client I can please because they have no idea what they want. And this is relatively earlier on in my career and I didn't have all the skills to help define that. And ultimately, I had to resign the client. So it did cost me money because I said, you know what, I don't think I can do this. I'm going to give you your money back. Good luck.
Whoa.
I'm going to give you your money
You
back.
gave him the money
I
back?
gave him the money back. I just wanted to wash my hands of this.
Wow.
And then when I saw the finished products, like, you know, I didn't want to be tortured through that whole process because what they ultimately did, believe it or not, was they picked Helvetica and they distressed the type a little bit.
Eesh.
That was his concept of a big idea company. He was not a big idea man. So I think it's one of those aspirational things, and their identity was horrible.
That makes sense, and I think in general, I like the fact that you can delineate, you know, what you will do and not do, and you'll say no. So I have a similar example on the ADD side. That this is actually even more ADD than I would ever imagine. This was while I was at Racerfish. We were doing the identity and building the website for the Go Network, which they acquired a company, and Michael Eisner was the CEO, and he was our client. And we presented to him logo options, and I remember Seth Epstein was directing. I wasn't even directing the design of this. It was Fuel, and they did over 100 variations and presented 5 weeks in a row. Every week he would bring different options that he had his Imagineering team put together. Oh, what about this? To us, he was wasting our time basically. And then he liked this over here and a monkey. We put a monkey on it. So that was a real kind of super creative ADD client. And ultimately, you know, they ended up doing the logo themselves.
Right.
They paid a lot of money for it, so we put up with it.
Right. I think some of these problems can be mitigated if you start off spending time doing strategy,
Yes.
brand positioning,
Yes.
and alignment of goals
Yes.
before you put pen to paper and start designing anything.
Yes.
To me, I love that because instead of saying it could be 35 options, it could be 2.
Yeah.
And I'll spend my time working on the 2.
Yeah.
Plus, I also find when you show the clients too many options, they get overwhelmed and they don't know which way to go.
Totally. The person that wants a lot from an application or from a video or from any kind of product or project, describe the MO of a client like that.
Okay, the MO is something like this. Usually it's couched off as something very innocent, like how hard would it be to add this thing? And it's very innocent because it sounds like, oh, it's not hard. And next thing you know, you're committed to doing that thing. And then one thing after another keeps happening, and we're getting into scope creep now.
Yeah.
So scope of work creep, right?
Yeah.
So it's starting to move beyond that, and you did not estimate for it. You couldn't have because you didn't know this is where it was going to go. There's 2 things here. One is to make sure that the feature or the request that's being asked is still in alignment with the goal.
Yeah.
It goes right back. It's like if you know what the bullseye is, some things take you away from that. You need to do right by your client and remind them that this is nice to have, but this is a direct conflict with the goal.
Yeah.
Right? And if you brought them through the whole process and facilitated that, they wouldn't even bring it up.
No.
Because they're the ones who told you it can't do this other thing. It can only do this.
That's a good
They're staying
point.
very focused. So there's another reason why you need to do that. The other part to it is to answer the question, instead of saying it's not hard to do, is to say it's not hard to do, but it's going to require an additional 35 hours. I can put together an overage for you if you want us to explore that.
Perfect.
Okay?
Perfect.
And that's usually when they realize every decision has a time and materials and an expense attached to it.
Repercussion.
You have to start teaching them that right away.
Do you put that in the contract, that additional requests will cost them more?
Yes.
Okay. So your contract should say any additional request will cost this much per hour.
That's right.
Yeah. But you said something before that was interesting, that if you have a process, both the strategic process at the beginning, but then a way to translate, especially in web, to translate what the goals are, like the wall metaphor that you use, it's like, where do you put the goal? That it's easier to control that versus just freestyle.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not just in web, but what I've learned with working with you and what I've learned through facilitation is, if you have a goal that's a shared thing, it's a social contract, especially if there's a large room. Nobody can say, we never talked about this, or where'd you get that idea from? Imagine if you talked to an architect and they briefly just said, okay, I'll go build your thing, they come back. Now you've got a big problem.
Yeah.
But if you told them, through a process of collaboration, define it's going to be a brick house, it's going to be a traditional home, it's going to be white outside, then when they come back with that, well, who said to do that? Well, we all said, this is what we're going to do. Does that make sense?
It
maybe
does.
I'm not, you give me that look.
I'm giving you the look, but here's why. I'm thinking this. What you're saying, the implication of what you're saying, is that now, and even more in the future, as things get more and more complex, that the collaborative process is more important, and that having the client involved in the design is more important, that having everybody in the room, all the stakeholders, is more important, that there no longer is this, like, here, have a brief, go away, bring us some designs, come back, and we'll look at it.
Right. Another way to think about this, and to abstract it a little bit, is, okay, so you and I, we both have run companies, and we have employees, and policies and procedures need to be established. Let's say one of the things is, we need to agree on a time in which we all show up. Now, there's ways I can do that, and consequences to it if you don't, if you're late, right? We can say, work starts at 8 a.m. If you're late more than 10 minutes twice, you're going to be written up, and after which I'm going to fire you. That's you.
Damn, you're harsh.
I'm saying that's
Right.
an example. It's not mine.
Yeah, I got it.
That's like from God to Moses to the people.
Yeah.
But if you came down and said, you guys, the objective here is for us to go home at a decent hour, to make sure that we're respectful of our own time, our coworkers' time, and our clients' time. What time do you think we need to come in so that we can get our work done in a reasonable amount of time? 10 o'clock? Does that work for everybody? So everybody's bought in. We talk about it 9, so that comes from them, all right? And so what happens if we're late? What happens if we come in late? What does late mean? And then they will devise the whole thing. So ultimately, later on, if you have to come back and say, Johnny, we talked about this.
You were in the room. Everybody else heard
You were in
it.
the room.
Yeah.
So,
what's up?
right? This is what we talked about.
Yeah.
And so now the punishment or the whatever
Right.
action that we were going to take was determined by the entire group.
Yeah.
So you have buy-in from everybody. Everybody is a stakeholder as to what we're supposed to do and what happens if we don't.
That's awesome, and those are really great solutions to all these different types of problem clients. We can talk about problem clients for a really long time, and again, if you guys can tweet us, our Twitters are below, or if you can comment on what are examples of problem clients that you guys have had, so that we can try to address them in future shows, or also just respond to your comments, that would be awesome. So we talked about the state of the industry, we talked about selling and
Pricing.
making money and pricing. Now we're talking about problem clients. Like, what would be the next evolution? Let us know in the comments. Thank you guys for watching this week. Next week, we're going to be talking about one of these topics, but we're going to leave it up to you guys. Here are the 3 options: designing an identity, how to manage a team, and how to staff up, which is kind of related to it, right? Make sure that you subscribe to the channel,
Right.
and that you tweet us what you think about the show, and that you leave some comments, and we'll see you next week.
Till next time, see you later.